Upon a time, there was a dude named Anthony. He sure did like himself. Everyone around him wondered how he did it. Anthony was the front desk clerk for a gas station on the corner of some intersection in his neighborhood. He was always ready for adventure, and adventure usually found him. His favorite kinds of adventures were those little mundane ones, like short walks down a slightly different street than usual, or choosing the restaurant down the block from his usual favorite place now and then. His town, Barrel Town, was medium-sized. He liked the size of his town, and the size of his workplace, and the size of his neighborhood. His apartment was also the correct size. For most of his week, he would sit behind the counter of the gas station and eat snacks. The culture of his town was pretty relaxed, and so his boss didn't mind if he ate snacks behind the counter. His particular gas station didn't really get as much traffic as the one a mile down the road anyway, so he had a lot of time to kill. Of course, there were plenty of important and specific tasks that he had to carry out on a daily basis, and he knew that at a busier gas station, he would probably be a lot more exhausted by all the things he had to do. But as it stood, he had a lot of room in his daily schedule to be able to take his time carrying out all of his daily tasks. Often, he was the only one there at the gas station for hours at a time. It made him a little nervous to be there alone sometimes because he worried about what might happen if he were to ever get attacked in the night or robbed. Even so, there were many peaceful nights. Sometimes the nights would get so peaceful, in fact, that Anthony would find himself accidentally falling asleep to the sound of the background music in the store or the cars going by. This embarrassed him because he didn't like the idea of sleeping on the job, so he drank a lot of coffee in order to stay up. Sometimes he worked shifts that were earlier in the day, and sometimes he worked evenings. This left his outside-of-work schedule in a bit of an uncomfortable state, but he found it to be tolerable at worst. Once he got home, he would make or heat up dinner, and then sit down on his couch and watch movies. Anthony loved all sorts of visual media, but films were his favorite things to watch. There were some nights where he wasn't in the mood for movies, and on those nights, he would usually turn to reality television. This was because episodic shows with an overarching plot usually lost his attention pretty easily. He preferred the experience of sitting down with a work of an art for an hour and a half, finishing it in one sitting, and then sitting and thinking about it a while before going to sleep. One day, Anthony was sitting at his usual post behind the desk, and the clock struck noon. Nobody was around, and it was pretty much exactly lunchtime, so he purchased a sandwich from his own workplace and heated it up in the microwave. One of the things he liked most about working at a gas station was that there was a lot of food there. If there was one thing Anthony loved almost as much as movies, it was food. He wasn't picky, but rather he just loved the experience. As he ate his sandwich, he started thinking a bit harder about what he wanted to do with his evening. He usually didn't plan out his days very carefully, he just kind of did stuff and fell into a routine over time. On this particular day, he was thinking of doing the version of his routine that involved maximum eating. He lived almost entirely for pleasure. His favorite thing of all was to sit down in front of a good long movie with enough snacks to get him through the night, and then watch it in his living room in the dark. He loved horror movies, documentaries, comedies, and romantic movies. Mysteries were not really his favorite, but a mystery element was welcome in his opinion, as long as it didn't take up the entire film. He didn't think mystery was a bad genre, but he found it cloying. That particular night, he ended up choosing a documentary when he got home. On his way out of the gas station, he had decided to purchase several more snacks for himself, as well as a gigantic burrito to heat up in the microwave at home. He sat down on his couch, surrounded by candy, with a blanket over his legs and the burrito on a plate in his lap, and started the movie on his laptop. The actual movie itself was pretty depressing. It was about a man who had been kidnapped and held as prisoner in somebody's house for 20 years straight. By the end of it, Anthony was actually feeling sort of hollow. He regretted choosing the documentary. He had considered quitting watching it halfway through. But unfortunately, he was not the kind of person who could just quit a movie halfway through. He had to know what would happen, even if that meant finding out that a horrible person had stalked this dude for 5 years prior to kidnapping him. Hearing the main dude of The Thing describe his experience with exiting the house and seeing the current decade for the first time in 20 years made Anthony feel like nothing actually mattered in the whole world. In order to get himself out of this mood, he put on a comedy. But he found this one to be rather annoying. Still, he couldn't just not finish it, so he just sat there watching a really weird, semi-funny movie go on for too long. After this uncomfortable double feature, he thought to himself, well, maybe it would be a good night to go to bed immediately. He got off of the couch, brushing the candy wrappers off of himself, and closed his laptop. Then he changed into pajamas and brushed his teeth and went to bed. Right before sleep, he took all his medicine and then he slept for 9 hours.